Madam IFEOMA had spent years weaving a future for her daughter, one of privilege, status, and influence. Every conversation, every carefully planned introduction, every calculated display of elegance had led to this moment. Chief Obinna was coming to choose a bride. The air was thick with expectation. Chidera, dressed in a gown that shimmered like liquid gold, sat poised, the perfect image of refinement. Every detail had been orchestrated for victory. The perfect daughter. The perfect marriage. The perfect life. But perfection is an illusion. And in a single heartbeat, everything shattered. The moment Chief Obinna stepped through the doors, his gaze swept past Chidera, past the wealth, past the grandeur, until it landed on a shadow in the corner. Silence crashed over the room like a tidal wave. Wine glasses trembled in frozen hands. Madam IFEOMA's breath hitched. Chidera's carefully painted smile cracked. She felt the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her as her name, once spoken in whispers, now echoed through the halls. But no one knew the truth. No one saw the storm that had been brewing in the past. Not yet. Because the man standing before them was not just here to choose a bride. He was here to settle an old debt. In the vibrant city of Lagos, where wealth and power dictated social standing, a woman named Madam IFEOMA had spent her entire life preparing her daughter, Chidera, for a future of prestige. Born into affluence, she had always believed that beauty, charm, and connections would secure her daughter a life of luxury. And now, with Chief Obinna, the wealthiest and most influential businessman in the country, seeking a wife, she saw the perfect opportunity. The grand mansion was prepared, the finest dishes set on the long mahogany table, and Chidera dressed in an extravagant lace gown that shimmered under the golden chandelier. She was radiant, her skin glowing with the finest oils, her jewelry sparkling like the stars above. IFEOMA beamed with pride as she ushered her daughter toward the awaiting guest. Chief Obinna, welcome to our home. You must have heard of my daughter, Chidera. She is well educated, cultured, and would make the perfect wife for a man of your caliber. The chief, dressed in a crisp white agbada with gold embroidery, exuded authority, his presence commanding the entire room. Yet, as he scanned the opulence before him, his eyes landed not on Chidera but on the quiet figure in the corner, Addis. The young woman, dressed in a simple Ankara gown, with no makeup or jewelry, sat humbly, her head bowed as she arranged the tea tray. She had lived in the household since she was a child, treated more like a servant than family. Actually, Chief Obinna spoke, his deep voice cutting through the air, I am here for her. A silence so thick it could be sliced with a knife fell over the room. IFEOMA's smile faltered, her carefully orchestrated plans crumbling before her eyes. Chidera's perfectly painted lips parted in shock, her hand tightening around her wine glass. Addis' hands trembled as the cup she was holding slipped from her grasp, crashing onto the polished marble floor. She turned her gaze upward, her eyes wide with disbelief. Me, she whispered. Chief Obinna smiled gently. Yes, Addis. Will you marry me? The air in the room grew tense, suffocating. Madam IFEOMA's expression darkened, her perfectly arched brows furrowing in fury. No. This cannot be, she hissed. Chief, you must be mistaken. You are here for Chidera, my daughter. Chief Obinna remained calm, his gaze unwavering. No, Madam IFEOMA. I know exactly why I'm here. Chidera's face twisted in disbelief. You cannot choose her over me. Look at her, she is just a maid. Addis flinched at the words, but Chief Obinna remained unmoved. He turned to Addis, his voice softer now. Do you remember me? Addis' heart pounded. She studied his face, searching for familiarity, but nothing clicked. No, sir, she answered hesitantly. Chief Obinna nodded, understanding. Years ago, you would not have. You were just a child when you gave a hungry boy a piece of bread outside the market. The memory struck Adis like a thunderbolt. She remembered that day, the scorching sun, the boy in tattered clothes who had looked at her with pleading eyes, his hands trembling with hunger. She had handed him her last piece of bread without a second thought. That boy was me, Chief Obinna revealed, his voice thick with emotion. Gasps echoed through the room. IFEOMA staggered back, her hands clutching the edge of the dining table for support. Chidra's eyes widened in horror. That cannot be possible, she shrieked. Chief Obinna chuckled, though his eyes remained sharp. I never forgot that act of kindness. It changed me. It gave me hope. And now, I want to change your life too. Adis felt her chest tighten, tears welling in her eyes. For years, she had been told she was worthless, a nobody. Yet here stood the most powerful man in the country, telling her she had mattered. IFEOMA snapped out of her daze, grabbing Chidra's hand and shoving her forward. Chief, you must reconsider. Chidra is beautiful, educated, and sophisticated. She is the perfect wife for a man of your status. Chief Obinna's expression darkened. I know exactly what kind of person Chidra is. Chidra gasped, her face paling. What do you mean? Chief Obinna's voice was cold now. She is selfish, entitled, and cruel. I have observed from afar. I would never marry a woman like that. Chidra let out a sharp cry, her hands trembling. You are lying. This is a mistake. IFEOMA turned to Adis, her eyes burning with hatred. You planned this, didn't you? You seduced him behind my back. Adis gasped. No. I would never. A sharp slap cut through the air, the force of IFEOMA's palm sending Adis tumbling back. She held her cheek, her body shaking. Enough. Chief Obinna's voice was like thunder. He stepped forward, his presence towering over IFEOMA. If you ever lay a hand on her again, you will regret it. IFEOMA's mouth opened, then closed, fear flickering in her eyes. She knew the power he held. Chief Obinna turned back to Adis, his voice gentle once more. The choice is yours, Adis. Will you marry me? Adis' heart pounded as she looked at the shocked faces around the room. Could this be real? Was this truly happening? Swallowing hard, she took a deep breath. And then, she gave her answer. Yes. A hush fell over the room. IFEOMA's lips trembled, her carefully built dreams shattered before her. Chidra looked as though she had been struck by lightning. Chief Obinna's eyes softened as he stepped forward, taking Adis' trembling hand in his. You said yes, he repeated, as if he himself could hardly believe it. Adis nodded, her voice shaky. Yes, I will marry you. Chidra let out a choked sob. No. You can't choose her over me. Look at her. What does she have that I don't? IFEOMA grabbed Adis' arm roughly, her nails digging into her skin. You little wretch. You think you can steal my daughter's future? Chief Obinna's expression darkened. Let her go. His voice carried so much authority that IFEOMA immediately released her, her hands shaking. You don't understand, she cried. Chidra is meant for this life. Adis is just a what? Chief Obinna challenged, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. IFEOMA stammered, looking away. She doesn't belong in wealth. She's not good enough. Chief Obinna's lips curled into a smirk. And yet, it was her kindness that made me who I am today. Chidra stormed forward, tears streaking her face. Chief, please. I can change. I can be humble, he raised a hand, silencing her. A good heart is not something you wear like makeup, Chidra. It is who you are at your core. And I have seen who you are. Chidra gasped as though he had slapped her. IFEOMA, realizing she was losing, quickly changed her tone. She forced a smile, her voice sickly sweet. Chief, my dear, We have always treated Adis well. We love her like our own. She reached for Adis' hand, but Adis snatched it away. Love, she whispered. They had done nothing but make her a servant in her own home. Chief Obinna saw the pain in her eyes and turned to IFEOMA. Then you will have no problem letting her go, will you? IFEOMA hesitated, then forced a laugh. Of course not. If this is what she wants, then we give her our blessing. But her eyes burned with hatred, promising revenge. Chief Obinna nodded. Good. He turned to Adis. Come with me. Trembling, Adis placed her hand in his. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. As they walked towards the door, IFEOMA let out a bitter laugh. You will regret this, Adis. That man will throw you out like trash. Adis stopped at the doorway, turned back, and smiled softly. No, stepmother. You already did that. And with that, she walked away, stepping into a future she never thought possible. As Adis stepped into Chief Obinna's world, she felt as though she had entered a completely different realm. The grand estate that stretched before her was unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering gates, lined with gold accents, swung open at their arrival, revealing a mansion that looked as though it had been plucked from the pages of a fairy tale. The sprawling lawns, the shimmering fountains, the polished marble floors, it was all too much. Too unreal. For years, she had lived in the shadows of wealth, scrubbing the floors of people who saw her as nothing more than a burden. And now, she was being welcomed into it as its future mistress. Chief Obinna, ever composed, noticed the way her fingers trembled as she clutched the hem of her simple dress. You do not have to be afraid, he assured her as they entered the grand foyer. You belong here. Belong. The word echoed in her mind, foreign yet enticing. Could it really be true? Could she, a girl who had spent most of her life being told she was nothing, truly belong in a place like this? The household staff lined up along the staircase, their faces a mixture of curiosity and surprise. It was clear that they had expected a woman of refinement, someone like Chidra, dressed in the finest silks, adorned with diamonds, exuding an air of entitlement. Instead, they saw Adis, a young woman whose hands still bore the calluses of years spent scrubbing floors, her only jewelry the courage that allowed her to step into the unknown. Madame Ebo, the housekeeper who had served the Obinna family for decades, was the first to speak. Welcome, Miss Adis, she said, her voice neutral. We have prepared your room. Her room. It had always been a corner in someone else's house. A cramped space behind the kitchen. A shed mat on the floor with other servants. Now, she had a room. Her own room. Chief Obinna nodded at Madame Ebo before turning back to Adis. Take your time to settle in, he said gently. When you are ready, we will talk. She nodded, unable to find her voice as she followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase. The room she was led to was bigger than the entire quarters she had shared with other house staff at Madame IFEOMA's home. The bed was massive, the sheets softer than anything she had ever felt. A balcony overlooked a lush garden, the scent of fresh flowers drifting through the open doors. She touched the fabric of the curtains, feeling their smoothness beneath her fingertips, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she was not dreaming. But not everyone was pleased. That night, as Adis sat on the balcony, trying to make sense of this new reality, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. You may have fooled him, but you will never be one of us. Enjoy it while it lasts, you filthy little rat. She didn't need to guess who it was. Chidra. The words stung, but they did not break her. She had endured worse. Still, she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. Was Chidra right? Was this all temporary? Would Chief Obinna eventually see her as unworthy? And if so, what would happen to her then? The next morning, she woke early, her old habits refusing to die. She made her way downstairs, intending to help in the kitchen, only to find Madame Ebo blocking her way. "That is not your place anymore," the older woman said firmly. "You are to be the future wife of Chief Obinna. Act like it." Adi swallowed hard. "I don't know how." Madame Ebo's expression softened just a little. "Then you must learn." And so, the lessons began. From dawn till dusk, Adis was taught the ways of the elite. How to walk, how to sit, how to eat with fine silverware. How to hold conversations at grand parties, how to read between the lines of carefully worded agreements. How to stand tall even when people whispered behind her back. But the whispers never stopped. She heard the staff murmuring when they thought she wasn't listening. Heard the guests at Obinna's lavish parties question what a girl like her was doing in a house like this. One evening, as she stood at the edge of a ballroom, watching the wealthy and powerful mingle, she overheard a group of socialites laughing behind their crystal glasses. "She doesn't belong here," one woman whispered. "It's laughable that Chief Obinna thinks she could ever fit into our world." Another chuckled. "She's just a charity case. He'll come to his senses soon enough." Adis clenched her fist, her heart pounding. Every fiber of her being told her to run, to leave before they could cast her out first. But then she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Chief Obinna. He had heard everything. The room grew silent as he stepped forward, his powerful presence impossible to ignore. He turned to the women, his voice dangerously calm. "You speak as though your wealth makes you superior," he said. "But tell me, if I took it all away, what would be left?" The women exchanged nervous glances, shifting uncomfortably. Obinna continued. "True worth is not found in titles or bank accounts. It is found in character, in kindness, in the strength to endure when the world tries to break you." He turned back to Adis, his eyes filled with something unreadable. "And I have found more of that in her than in all the riches in this room combined." The whispers stopped after that. But even as Chief Obinna stood by her side, even as he silenced the critics, Adis knew that not everyone would accept her. And the biggest threat was yet to come. A week later, an invitation arrived. A grand gala, hosted by the influential families of Lagos. A night where the most powerful people in the country would gather. And she was expected to attend. Madame Ebo handed her the invitation with a knowing look. "This will be your true test." Adis felt the weight of it in her hands. She had survived years of mistreatment. Had endured the cruelty of IFEOMA and Chidra. But was she ready for this? Ready to walk into a world that had already decided she did not belong? That night, she stood before the mirror in a gown finer than anything she had ever worn. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Chief Obinna appeared behind her, his reflection meeting hers in the mirror. "Are you afraid?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then let them be the ones to fear you." As they stepped out together, into the night, into the unknown, Adis realized something. She was no longer the girl who had cowered in the shadows. She was stepping into the light. And no one, no matter how powerful, would take that away from her. The night of the grand gala arrived, and the Obinna estate buzzed with activity. It was more than just a social event, it was a battlefield, where status, influence, and power were tested with every glance, every whispered conversation, every calculated move. And for Adis, it was the moment where she would either prove she belonged in this world or be swallowed whole by it. The dress Chief Obinna had chosen for her was breathtaking, a flowing emerald green gown, its fabric shimmering with every movement. The intricate embroidery glistened under the golden lights of the chandelier as she stepped into the limousine. She had never worn anything so exquisite before. And yet, despite the beauty of it all, she felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. "Are you ready?" Chief Obinna asked, seated beside her, his gaze steady and reassuring. Addis exhaled slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." The limousine pulled up to the grand hall, where cameras flashed, reporters lined the entrance, and the city's most powerful figures arrived in luxury vehicles. The moment the chauffeur opened the door, all eyes turned to them. Addis stepped out, her heartbeat drumming in her ears, her posture poised yet tense. The whispers started immediately. "Is that her? The maid-turned-fiancée? She doesn't belong here." Chief Obinna could have had any woman, and he chose that. She kept her head high, remembering Obinna's words, "Let them be the ones to fear you." But it was easier said than done. Every step she took felt heavier, the judgmental gazes piercing through her confidence like daggers. She had fought battles before, but none quite like this. As they entered the ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. The grand hall was dazzling, decorated with crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and golden accents. At the center of the room stood the elite, the old money families, the business moguls, the politicians. And among them, the woman Addis dreaded most, Chidra. Dressed in a stunning ruby-red gown, Chidra exuded confidence, her expression one of controlled fury. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her every step calculated, her every smile deceptive. When their eyes met, Chidra's lips curled into a smirk. It was the silent promise of war. The night was long. Addis met countless people, each interaction laced with hidden meaning. Some greeted her politely, masking their disdain behind tight smiles. Others ignored her entirely, refusing to acknowledge her presence. But the worst was yet to come. During dinner, as glasses clinked and laughter echoed through the hall, a woman with elegantly coiffed hair and an air of superiority leaned in close to Chief Obinna. "Tell me, Chief," she drawled, her voice dripping with insincerity, "whatever possessed you to choose someone so unconventional?" The table fell silent. All eyes turned to him, waiting, expecting him to waver, to admit that Addis was a mistake. Obinna, however, did not hesitate. He set down his glass and met the woman's gaze with unwavering authority. Because true worth is not measured by wealth or status. It is measured by integrity, by resilience, by kindness. The woman blinked, caught off guard. "But surely, you could have." "No," Obinna cut in sharply. "I could not. I chose the woman who proved herself worthy, not in riches, but in heart." The conversation ended there. And though the whispers did not cease, Addis saw something shift. Some looked at her with newfound curiosity. Others, with reluctant respect. It wasn't complete acceptance, but it was a step forward. However, not everyone took it lightly. As the gala neared its end, Chidra made her move. She approached the main table with a confident stride, her red gown flowing like liquid fire. "Addis," she said sweetly, her voice carrying just enough venom to be lethal. "I must say, I never imagined you in a place like this." Addis refused to rise to the bait. "And yet, here I am." Chidra tilted her head. "Yes. Here you are. But the question is, for how long?" A few guests turned their attention to the conversation, sensing the tension. Chidra leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You don't belong in this world, Addis. These people, this life, it will never accept you. And when Obinna realizes that, he will discard you, just like everyone else has." Addis clenched her jaw. She wanted to lash out, to defend herself, but she knew that was exactly what Chidra wanted, to see her falter, to see her lose control. Instead, she took a slow breath and smiled. "Funny," she said, "because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one who's been discarded." Chidra's smile froze. A murmur rippled through the nearby guest. For the first time, Chidera had no response. Addis had won this battle, but she knew the war was far from over. Later that night, as they returned home, Obinna turned to her. "You handled yourself well." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I don't know if I did. I just survived." He smiled. "Sometimes, that is enough." But deep down, Addis knew that surviving was not enough. If she was to truly claim her place in this world, she needed to do more than endure. She needed to thrive. The aftermath of the gala settled over Addis like a thick fog. Though she had held her ground against Chidera and silenced many doubters, she knew this was just the beginning. The elites of Lagos were not easily won over, and Chidera, humiliated and furious, would not let this defeat go unchallenged. She could sense it in the way whispers followed her through the halls of Obinna's estate, in the way some of the staff hesitated before addressing her, unsure if she was truly their future madam or just another passing face. But Addis had learned something valuable that night: power was not just given. It was claimed, earned, and wielded with purpose. And she was ready to claim hers. Days passed in a blur of lessons, meetings, and careful navigation of high society. Madame Ebo continued to coach her, ensuring she was prepared for every possible challenge that could come her way. "Confidence is your greatest weapon," the housekeeper told her one afternoon as they reviewed the etiquette of formal greetings. "They can question your background, your status, even your place at Chief Obinna's side. But if you stand firm, they will have no choice but to respect you." Addis nodded, absorbing every word. The more she learned, the more she realized that this world was not just about wealth, it was about influence, connections, strength of will. And she had something most of them did not: resilience. But then, the storm came. It began with a rumor. Whispers spread through the city, reaching the ears of business partners, politicians, and media outlets alike. Someone had leaked a story about Addis, about her past, about how she had grown up as a mere servant in the household of IFEOMA. The headlines were brutal. "From rags to riches, or just a gold digger. Chief Obinna's bride-to-be, a Cinderella story or a carefully calculated climb." The gossip spread like wildfire, feeding the insatiable appetite of the Lagos elite. At first, Addis tried to ignore it, telling herself that it didn't matter what strangers thought of her. But when she arrived at a business luncheon Obinna had arranged for her to meet his associates, she was met with cold stares and whispered conversations that halted the moment she entered the room. Obinna noticed the shift immediately, his protective instincts kicking in. "If anyone here has an issue with the woman I have chosen, speak now," he said, his voice calm but commanding. Silence. Then, one of the older businessmen cleared his throat. "Chief Obinna, you know we respect you greatly. But this situation has raised concerns. A woman of her background, can she truly represent you? Will she not tarnish the legacy you have built?" Addis' hands clenched into fists under the table. She wanted to shout, to demand what right they had to judge her. But she took a deep breath, remembering Madame Ebo's advice. Confidence was her weapon. She met the businessman's gaze squarely. "With all due respect, sir, Chief Obinna's legacy is not built on appearances. It is built on strength, vision, and the ability to rise above challenges. And I assure you, I know more about overcoming challenges than anyone in this room." There was a bit of silence, then murmurs of surprise. Some nodded in grudging acknowledgement, while others remained skeptical. But Obinna smiled, his pride evident. "That is why I chose her," he said simply. The luncheon continued, but Addis knew this was only the beginning. The attacks would not stop. And soon, they became more personal. A few days later, Addis woke to a series of missed calls and frantic messages. She rushed downstairs to find Obinna pacing, his phone in hand, his expression grim. "What's wrong?" she asked, her heart pounding. He turned to her, his jaw clenched. "It's IFEOMA and Chidra." A cold chill ran down her spine. "What have they done?" He handed her a tablet, the screen displaying a video that had gone viral overnight. In it, IFEOMA sat on a plush couch, a glass of expensive wine in hand, while Chidra dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, feigning distress. "She was nothing," IFEOMA declared, her voice dripping with malice. "A girl we took in out of the kindness of our hearts. We gave her food, shelter, even let her stay in our home. And this is how she repays us. By seducing Chief Obinna and stealing my daughter's rightful place." Chidra sniffled dramatically. "She was like a sister to me," she said, voice trembling. "And now she's turned against us, dragging our family name through the mud." Adi's blood boiled. Lies. All of it. IFEOMA had never treated her like family, she had been nothing more than a servant, barely acknowledged except when chores needed to be done. And Chidra. She had never once shown her kindness. Now they were playing the victims, twisting the truth to turn the world against her. She looked up at Obinna, anger blazing in her eyes. "I won't let them do this." He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Then fight back." The interview was set for the next evening. The most-watched talk show in Lagos had invited her to tell her side of the story, and she knew this was her chance. Not just to defend herself, but to reclaim her own narrative. As she sat in the makeup chair, preparing for the cameras, she felt a wave of nerves threaten to consume her. But then she saw Obinna watching from the side, his expression unwavering. He believed in her. And she would not let him down. The host, a sharp-eyed woman known for her no-nonsense style, wasted no time. "Adis, the public wants to know, who are you, really? Did you plan all this? Did you manipulate your way into Chief Obinna's life?" Adis took a deep breath. Then, she spoke. "I grew up in a house where I was told I was nothing. Where I was reminded every day that I did not belong. But I never let that break me. I worked. I endured. And when fate brought Chief Obinna into my life, I did not ask for his kindness. He gave it really. Not because I deceived him, not because I sought to take anyone's place, but because he saw something in me that others refused to see, my worth." The audience was silent, hanging on to her every word. "I am not ashamed of where I come from," she continued. "Because my past is not a weakness, it is my strength. It made me who I am. And I will not apologize for surviving." The interview ended with applause. And the tides began to turn. The next morning, Adi's words were all over the news. People who had doubted her now saw her in a different light. She had not begged for validation, had not crumbled under pressure. She had stood her ground. Back at the estate, as she walked through the garden with Obinna, she finally allowed herself to exhale. "Did I do enough?" she asked quietly. He smiled, taking her hand. "More than enough." But she knew this was not the end. IFEOMA and Chidra would not stop. And the final battle was still to come. Because while Adis had won over the public, there was one last person she needed to face. Herself. And that, she realized, was the hardest battle of all. The days following Adi's powerful interview were filled with a storm of reactions. Some praised her courage, calling her a woman of strength who had endured hardship and risen above it. Others still clung to their prejudices, refusing to believe that a woman of her background could belong in the elite circles of Lagos. But there was one undeniable truth: she was no longer a nobody. She had a voice now, and she had used it well. Yet, Adis knew that the battle was far from over. IFEOMA and Chidra had been publicly embarrassed, their plans to discredit her backfiring as more people began questioning their true motives. But Addis had known them long enough to understand that they would not go down without one final, desperate attempt to reclaim their lost power. She was right. It began with a message, one delivered not through newspapers or gossip channels, but directly to the Obinna estate. An invitation, handwritten in IFEOMA's elegant script, requesting a private meeting. Addis frowned as she read the words aloud. She wants to see me. Alone. Obinna, who had been reviewing business reports, immediately looked up. It's a trap, he said, his voice hard. You don't owe her anything. Ignore it. But Addis wasn't sure. Maybe, she admitted. But this feels different. IFEOMA has never asked for a private meeting before. She has always tried to control things from a distance, using others to fight her battles. She met his gaze, determination shining in her eyes. I need to hear what she has to say. Obinna exhaled slowly. He knew better than to try and dissuade her when her mind was made up. Then I'm coming with you. She shook her head. No. IFEOMA asked for me alone. If she wants to talk, then let's see if she finally has the courage to face me without an audience. And so, for the first time since stepping into her new life, Addis walked willingly back into the lion's den. The meeting was set at a private villa, far from the prying eyes of the media, away from the bustling streets of Lagos. When Addis arrived, she found IFEOMA already waiting, seated on a shaded patio with a glass of red wine in hand. Chidera was nowhere in sight. You came, IFEOMA remarked, her voice deceptively smooth. Addis took a seat across from her, keeping her expression neutral. What do you want? If IFEOMA was offended by her bluntness, she didn't show it. Instead, she took a slow sip of her wine before setting the glass down. I underestimated you, she admitted. I never thought you had it in you to stand up to me. To all of this. Addis folded her arms. And now that I have. IFEOMA leaned forward, her gaze sharp. Now, I'm offering you a choice. Addis narrowed her eyes. A choice. IFEOMA nodded. Walk away. Leave Obinna, leave Lagos, and I will ensure that you are compensated handsomely. You will never have to struggle again. No one will ever question your place in society, because you will no longer be in it. Addis felt a cold laugh rise in her throat. You want me to sell my dignity for money? IFEOMA sighed, as if speaking to a child who refused to listen. You don't understand, Addis. This world will never fully accept you. They may tolerate you now because you forced your way in, but eventually, they will turn on you. And when they do, you will have nothing. Addis studied the woman before her, seeing through the perfectly curated exterior to the desperation lurking beneath. IFEOMA was afraid, not just of losing to Addis, but of what it meant. That someone like her, someone she had deemed unworthy, had risen beyond her grasp. IFEOMA, Addis said slowly, I have spent my whole life fighting. Fighting to be seen, fighting to survive. And for the first time, I'm not fighting alone. Obinna chose me, not because of money, not because of status, but because of who I am. And I choose him. IFEOMA's lips pressed into a thin line. You're making a mistake. No, Addis countered, standing to her feet. I'm finally making the right choice. She turned to leave, but IFEOMA's voice stopped her. Then be ready, she warned. Because I will not make this easy for you. Addis didn't look back. You never have, she replied. And yet, here I am. As expected, IFEOMA did not take rejection well. Within days, new scandals surfaced, fabricated stories, manipulated images, whispers that Addis had been involved in illicit dealings. But this time, she was prepared. She had allies now, people who had seen her for who she truly was and were willing to stand by her. Obinna himself made a public statement, denouncing the lies and making it clear that no amount of slander would change his decision. And then, the final blow came. During a live interview, a former housemaid of IFEOMA's came forward, revealing the years of mistreatment she and others had suffered under her rule. More testimonies followed, each one painting a damning picture of the woman who had tried to bring Addis down. In the end, IFEOMA's influence crumbled, and Chidera, humiliated beyond repair, disappeared from the public eye. Addis had won. The wedding was a grand affair, but for Addis, it wasn't about the glamour, the gold-threaded fabrics, or the exquisite decor. It was about the journey that had led her here. About standing beside the man who had believed in her when the world tried to silence her. As she walked down the aisle, she saw faces that had once doubted her now watching with admiration. She saw Madame Ebel, smiling proudly. She saw friends she had made along the way, people who had become family. And at the end of the aisle, she saw Obinna, waiting for her, as he always had. When they exchanged vows, it was not just a promise of love, but of partnership. Of standing together no matter what came their way. As they stepped out as husband and wife, the sun setting behind them in brilliant hues of orange and gold, Addis knew that her battle was not just about proving herself. It was about creating a future where she would never have to prove herself again. Because she had already won. Thank you besties for watching till the end. What do you think of this story, and did it remind you of anyone? Please share in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to Folktales by IJ, so we can keep bringing you inspiring African folktale stories on Folktales by IJ.